I'm going to really quickly double check the YouTube channel to make sure it says that we're going live. It does say we are going live, so that's good. That did work. Good. Okay. Quality.
Gotta love that, like, technical limbo moment where you're just like, is it working?
I have been done dirty so many times in the last 3 months by all of the technology, including on the live stream that I did just 2 days ago, that I'm trusting nothing. I tested my microphone today to make sure it was not doing that weird echoing thing. I don't even know what caused that weird echoing thing. I just messed with some settings and reconnected my mic, and now it works. So...
Did you turn it on and off again?
Apparently not, and I didn't check, and that was on me. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're not here to talk about tech issues, because we know and love those very well. Hey guys, it's us. It's Betwixt the Books. We're going to do a discussion today. Gretchen brought the
I know we're both here.
Time. I know. It's crazy. Gretchen brought the topic this time, and she wanted to talk about specifically some of the effects that some of the changes that have been announced to the book community at large, and how that sort of affects those of us that are content creators in general, but also consumers, because I'm sure it will also affect just the general populace. The big one of that being that it was announced that at least they are attempting, although it could be rejected because of it being a possible monopoly, but at least there's an attempt that Penguin Random House is going to acquire Simon & Schuster Publishing, which, if folks don't know, those are two of the biggest publishers, like publishing houses in the world right
and
now.
They already used to be three,
yes,
because Penguin and Random House used to be separate, and then they combined, and now they're trying to snatch up Simon and Schuster, which will just be then too long of an acronym, like PRHS.
Yeah.
Like, just, we publish most of the books. That's the new title.
They need to make a new name, probably, at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So, we found out about that, I think, through Book Community on Jess Owen's channel, correct? Is that how you heard about it too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The second thing that I brought up, I did find out about on my own, but I mean, I have never, in my entire history of YouTube, BookTube, followed anyone as like closely as I follow Jess when she posts her Book Community videos. Like, I know they're on Tuesday, and I wait for my lunch break, and I'm like, ooh boy, what's on fire today? So if you have not seen these videos, they're an incredible way to keep up with what's happening in publishing and the book community, you know, Bookstagram, BookTube, Book Twitter, Book Talk. Because like I don't have time for this myself. And she's just amazing.
Even I think I watch BookTube more regularly than Gretchen does. Like, I'm fairly certain about that. Even I...
It's not hard.
Yeah. Even I don't know nearly as much stuff as Jess does. She has just got her finger on, like, all of these different pulses, and I'm sure there are some viewers, too, that have, as she's acquired them, send her things that maybe she might not have seen initially, too. So, yeah, if you're like us, and you're social media impaired, where you do not use them the way that they are intended and therefore miss out on all of the discussions that are happening everywhere until it becomes overdone, that might be a good place to check and just watch some stuff just to see, even if it's just to like sort of understand some of the commentary that's going on in the communities, even if it's not something that you need for news, but just to get a good resource to understand, like, oh, what are people talking about on other platforms. If you only watch YouTube, or if you are only on Instagram, you might not see some of these other conversations that are happening. But yeah, we both watch her and highly recommend her, and we wanted to talk about this one thing because, in part because we are a small channel, so we are small blogger, small reviewer, and it affects us on that front, but also we both work in the book community in different ways that could also be affected by things like a giant book merger, because Gretchen is a librarian and I am a bookseller, and those types of mergers can also affect us and things that are happening around us in our personal life, our professional life, whatever it is outside of YouTube, or not our
Yeah.
blogging life.
And in case you're like, well, how many things can this really change? Because there are other publishers. I mean, just look at the huge impact that it made when Macmillan made all of those really sketchy decisions about their ebook policies and what that meant. And of course, they got a lot of flack for that from the community, and so they eventually, reneged. Although that was also partially pandemic influenced, because can you imagine had those been solidified and then the pandemic hit and libraries couldn't buy more than one copy of Barack Obama's, biography, and how angry people would have been. I don't want to spend too much time rehashing that, but do look into that if you are confused what I'm talking about. But that could have had a huge impact on the librarian community, but it was stopped because the community pushed back. Now imagine that like a third or more of the books out there in the entire globe are being published by one publishing house. Like when you control that much monopoly over who gets signed, what books are produced, what the guidelines are for how they are given to libraries, bookstores. I mean, you have the power to change consumer culture, because it doesn't matter how much grief you get. To a certain extent, you essentially own a third of the world and even the rabbit is running away. So that's, on a big scale, why something like the Penguin Random House Simon and Schuster merger is just like terrifying.
And we should say this is English language, because obviously
yes,
if you live
true.
in a foreign country, they have their own publishing houses. And it could also possibly be American only, because I don't know if there are different subsections of those publishers for like the UK and Australia, because sometimes we know they have different editions. I don't know if they're considered imprints or what. I'm not sure if that does also affect the UK, because they have the same publishers as well. They do also have Penguin. They do also have Random House, but I don't know if they are separate entities in this case, or if it would also affect them. So I'm not positive on that one.
Yeah, a full understanding of this would mean you need to understand so much corporation and business law to unpack how all of this is related. It's crazy. But even just if it's just like in America, especially because so many American authors are exported to other countries. And particularly in America, I think I wish we imported more authors than we do. But there are some huge, huge name authors that are, they're because of American publishing houses. And publishing already has had this problem, and I'm going to do so good, and I'm going to try to keep this to Cliff Notes, but this was a part of my master's thesis, so.
I believe in you.
Publishing already has this thing where they have restructured how and who they publish to consolidate more around fewer authors. So, it used to be that if you were at a large publishing house, you could maybe take a chance on more authors, or have, more resources that you could allocate to a smaller author. But with the way that this restructure has happened, there's just fewer authors getting more of the resources. And that means, whose books get made into arcs, who goes on tour, who gets the marketing, the pre-order campaigns that happen.
And then, bloggers or anybody to do reviews. Like, there are some big YouTubers and bloggers that will get like money as an option to talk about a book or feature a book on something like Instagram. Like, it isn't just always a free book. Sometimes there are money involved or partnerships involved. Like, anybody that talks about, I don't know, like any sort of partnership with a publisher, that would go out the window as well. They wouldn't be putting that money towards a smaller, newer, unknown necessarily.
Yeah. And that means also publishers being less willing to take a chance on weird or interesting or, potentially life-changing title. Particularly, my studies are all in YA, and YA is incredibly trend conscious. And so, if there is one publisher chasing one trend, essentially, because they have the monopoly on it. I mean, you think we got burnt out with the dystopias after the Hunger Games? We just get, like, stuck in a death loop.
Worse.
Please stop.
And that should also be said that goes, like, double or triple for diverse stories, that those will begin to become suppressed because, again, if you're searching for trends and your goal is to sell to the largest volume of readers, there is this idea in publishing that means that your books need to be very white and very heteronormative. So
very
your
able,
books,
very, like,
all of those things are gonna
all of it.
They're risky. Nobody wants to read about that. What?
And then, like, this is not to discount the incredible work done by smaller publishing houses, but this also affects them too because they could get pushed out of markets. You know, they often have higher operating costs, you know, because they're smaller, and they might not have, you know, as many, like, you know, James Patterson, I'm sure, like, brings in a ton of money and, like, that kind of a thing. You might not have that. And if they have to charge more for their books, for example, like, that is just one small example of how that can become an issue. Unless you
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, no. Right then. Gretchen was going to do a call to action, and she left. Discord said, no, Gretchen, you cannot do a call to action.
Okay, listen, let me try that again. Spend your money.
Yes.
Use your money as your voice to say, I want diverse stories. But also think, I mean, Michaela and I did a challenge about this, I think a while ago now, but, like, where we specifically sought out stories from smaller publishers. And that, like, that's also maybe something to keep in mind. Because even if you look at the thing and you're like, oh, it doesn't say Penguin Random House. Like, there are so many subsidiaries of these people that are actually just, at this point, there's only 4 major publishers in the world.
Yeah.
So,
and keep in mind that all of those imprints and smaller subsidiary publishing houses, whenever there is a merger, some of those close because they are considered extraneous costs. And usually those are... the reason that you would create an imprint is because they focus on something specific. Like, this imprint works on publishing, let's say, queer stories or whatever it is. And so they're looking for and taking in those stories and publishing them within their smaller imprint, or fantasy. Like, this does fantasy within this one does sci-fi, this one does whatever. They'll start cutting some of those smaller publishing houses because more often than not, they're the ones that also have those smaller authors. Because they're focusing on such niche environments, and it's not the large conglomerate. They tend to get downsized or merged as well.
If you do follow Jess, as she's very fond of saying, publishing is on fire right now, which is, like, literally a dumpster fire. And even without this merger, there are already, like, imprints closing, like. The entire world, publishing has been socked by COVID. You know, things just, I mean, crazy things like a paper shortage are now going to affect our lives, which is crazy. Buy books for Christmas early.
As someone who is a bookseller, I have never in my life experienced as many times as I have this holiday season, somebody asking for a book and me being like, well, so we have none in the store. And there's none in the warehouse. There is no stock. I can't even order it for you. There is no stock. And it's a new book. It's still in print. They just have not been able to print reprints of it for whatever reason. And so we do not have it. And that is something that, like, that causes problems because that's a loss of sale for, like, the booksellers, but it's also a loss of sale for those publishers because now that person may not buy that book because if they were intending it as a gift for Christmas, so they're not going to come back in January when it's in stock again.
Yeah.
Like, it's
and once again, smaller publishers get hit harder by this than bigger publishers that might have.
They can't outbid for resources. They don't have.
Yeah.
They can't. You know what we're saying? Yeah.
So speaking of outbidding for resources, I think this ties into the second thing that I wanted to also talk about, which is that Book Expo America, which has been for years and years and years the largest book industry event held every year at the Javits Center, has been technically canceled. They're saying they're going to reimagine it, and I don't know what that means. And it's possible that the argument that I'm about to make could be moot when, the people behind it do come out with some kind of reimagined version, but I'm cynical and I don't think that will be the case. But one of the things about Book Expo America is that I felt like, besides it being an incredible networking event, it to a certain extent felt like an equalizing force across a couple of different book industries in a way, like there's nothing that can replace it on that scale. And in particular, thinking about, okay, we are really small reviewers, and we are unlikely to have relationships with huge publishing houses or get the arcs of huge authors. But we could go to Book Expo and queue for the new Renee Adia, the new Lee Bardugo. Like, we could potentially get tickets for those books, have them, and be able to review them. And nothing brings views to your channel like an ARC review of an incredibly popular author, particularly YA. And again, that's my focus, so that's why I always go back to it. Also, nothing brings views to your channel like the ability to do a giveaway. But people don't care about, books they don't care about. And that if you come away with books from Book Expo, there's a really high chance people will care about them. And you can do a giveaway, which I have done the last several years after I've gone. You have smaller authors who benefit from huge crowds they would never have been able to attract on their own. And I've certainly discovered smaller publishing houses and smaller authors through this event that I never would have heard of otherwise. 2 years ago when I went, I made an incredible connection with a teeny tiny publishing house that basically only had one book series that they were publishing at the time. They've since branched out. But I won an event for my library, and now we own all their books, and I have a connection with their, publicity department. Like, it's just, all of that now is out the window, and I'm just concerned for all the little people.
So I have never been to BEA. I've never had the chance to go, and now in theory I won't have a chance to go, at least to what it used to be. I have a theory that what they're trying to do is disconnect the bloggers and Booktube people from the other half of BEA. They may do some events for the general public, because I do think that they do view bloggers and vloggers. While we are a very important part of their marketing, it's interesting. I don't think that they like having us at that event.
They
that's
don't.
my
Oh my
theory.
goodness.
That's why I think they're doing this.
100%. So, oh my goodness, who was it? The people who behind Holly Black's. Oh my goodness, I can't remember what they're called.
Do you want me to Google
but
it? I don't know.
It's the Twitter account that was tweeting about Holly Black's stuff the last time I went. And they decided that they were going to do surprise drops of arcs, not just of Holly Black's books, but of other books throughout the whole thing. So BEA is normally Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they started doing something called BookCon Saturday and Sunday, which was for the general public. And there was already a concern that BookCon was attracting more popular authors than BEA itself, because they were trying to draw in the public. So a lot of YA authors that I would have seen had they been at BEA weren't there because they were coming to BookCon.
Yeah, right.
And I was not going to stay for that. I've heard horror stories about BookCon. Whole booths getting knocked over because people were being so crazy.
Which is problematic.
Yeah.
There are things that event needs to do to help mitigate that sort of stuff from happening. Canceling it altogether, probably not the best option, but okay.
Yeah, so anyway, I'm sorry, I derailed myself. But anyway, they did one of these surprise drops. And people who were in the know, who were all the people on Twitter, who were mostly the book bloggers. I'm sure some of us like were also booksellers and librarians, but we're mostly. And when I say book bloggers, I'm like encompassing Bookstagram, Book Talk, Booktube. Like I'm just lumping it all under those who were here first.
The internet.
And I mean,
community.
People were running, like literally running, and I ended up like off to the side of a herd because I don't run.
You're like, I don't care enough for that.
I just I knew that it was gonna be like the wildebeest scene in The Lion King. I was just not interested. Yeah. And I mean, I looked over because I was standing by one of the publisher corral areas, and they just had the dirtiest looks on their face. Yeah. Like they were just so disgusted by this behavior. But I will say, like that was the publisher's decision.
Yeah.
Like we all can queue like adults when given a time and place to queue.
Yes.
Like that, they just chose to do that. What did they think would happen? I ask you.
Good point.
But I mean, it was just, their looks were so dirty. Oh my God.
And like, I get it, right? Because in theory, it's a marketing event where you're trying to create business ties. And I'm sure a lot of the people who are going to the event are people who have money to do that and also are quite young. Because again, YA is a very big market right now. It is probably the biggest growing market. It is probably the one that's making the most money for a lot of folks if they don't have those big names that they can keep selling, 1 million copies of their books. It doesn't matter how much what that author's writing about, but 1 million copies of that book is going to sell. So when the audience for those books skews quite young, not always, but skews quite young, they have never been more than likely to an event like that. And they do not necessarily know the etiquette that they are supposed to have at an event like that because they've only ever been to other events that are more open to the public, like maybe like a Comic-Con type thing, which will also have issues like that, like where there's like running around and queuing and screaming and fangirling and things like that. This sort of behavior at an event more than likely was not happening at BEA 5, 10, 15 years ago. Like when you go back in its history, it must more than likely was much more adult, much more people in the community acting like this is their job, because it is their job, whereas for a lot of us as bloggers and bloggers, it is a hobby and not a job, and therefore we are not treating it in the same way, because Gretchen and I, more than likely, if I was there, I would be treating it like a job opportunity. I would be giving out my business card. I would be saying, hey, I'm a blogger. If you want to, work with me, please work with me, and treating it thusly. Like, I'm not there to scream at authors or to faint or to go running after the biggest arcs. Like, again, that's not what I need in my life. Don't care, don't want it. But there's people who will do that. And that's probably what they're trying to
and also to your theory, so the people who run Book Expo America had made it really, really hard in recent years to get media passes, and media passes were also very expensive. Yes. I am a librarian, so I went under the librarian price, which, I mean, compared to the media pass price, like I actually don't understand how the cost was that disparate. Like, it was actually shocking.
The idea was, I'm sure, to try and get the rabble out of there, but what that actually does is just get rid of people who can't afford to go. It's like, it just means that the people who are going are the people who are getting daddy to pay for it. And I mean, we could talk about consumerism in like the book blogging community to the end of time, because there are, those are some cyclical issues. But with that, I mean, I just, again, want to like just circle back to like BEA being canceled. It unevens the playing field. It creates a larger like pyramid of those who can get things and those who can't. We will never be the channel that gets the biggest arcs. We don't want to be. That doesn't mean that you can't ever be. Yeah. So, people who work at this really hard, I'm not saying you can't do it, but
it just unlevels that playing field, because now, there are arcs on my shelves from authors that I adore, that I was able to do arc reviews for, that I would never have gotten any other way. Because and for anyone who's like, well, there's NetGalley and Edelweiss. Again, please remember that NetGalley and Edelweiss takes your follower count into consideration when they make their decisions, because just because it's an e-arc does not mean there is unlimited quantities. You would assume that would be the case. It's not. And again, I get by getting some bigger arcs because, again, I am a librarian who specifically buys youth materials. Anytime I have ever put in a request for adult books, they all get denied because they're like, well, you purchase youth materials. Why are you requesting this history book? And I'm like, but I want it.
Yeah.
But
I may have more access. Here's my problem that I am having. As someone who just recently went back to working for Barnes & Noble, Edelweiss does have a thing where I can check off and say, hey, I work for Barnes & Noble, and there are publishers that will give me arcs because I am a bookseller, because for the same reason that Gretchen is, if I read their book and I recommend it, I have the opportunity to hand it to more people because I'm seeing people face-to-face and talking about books, and they ask me for recommendations on the daily. That gives me a leg up over someone who is just a blogger, because if they are just a small blogger like we are, and we only have a couple hundred people that see our videos, they may not want to give me that arc in that same instance. But in order to tell Edelweiss that I work for Barnes & Noble, I have to join a specific community, and I have tried to join the community multiple times, and it will not let me in. So I'm frustrated. And I don't know how to fix that. But it's something like working in the community gives you a leg up, because they view that as more valuable. Unless you have a huge following, and by huge, I'm not meaning hundreds of thousands, but definitely more than we have. A couple hundred people that's nothing. You're gonna want more than that. Small publishers still would love for you to take their book, because more than likely they're getting very few people asking for them, and they would be more than happy for you to read them because they want that book out there, and any number of eyes on their book at that point is better than nothing.
Yeah, and I think that will become, again, if you want to work with small publishers now, again, becomes more important, because I can still go to something like ALA, which exists. The American Library Association has an event that is sort of similar to Book Expo America every year, but it's focused on librarians, and it is specifically a training and networking event. So while there are also publishers there with arcs, this is not necessarily the size of BEA, and it is very specific, job training and networking. But it's also way more expensive, and also moves around the country. So were ALA to show up in Seattle, I can barely afford to go to ALA, let alone fly to Seattle. Which I understand was a problem for people who were blogging out of California, Nevada, Utah. Book Expo America was always in New York. So I understand that was also a problem. But it's not the same. Because
No, go ahead. I'm looking for a thing.
Okay. So again, it's just, how many of the smaller publishers go to ALA, because it's not as big of an event, and I happen to have that access because I am a librarian, but that just gives me, that's a leg up. Michaela gets a leg up as a bookseller. If that's not you, again, you are disqualified from this. And I just worry that also with this consolidation, again, arcs, particularly physical arcs, are expensive to produce, and then they have to be printed, and then they have to be shipped. That is a serious chunk of change you are committing to this author. And even if it's just the e-arc, again, that e-arc has to be produced. It is being produced along the lines of getting that book fully published, but it's still something that they take the time to produce and distribute for that author. And if they are, less resources, less authors getting published,
the
just
cost of
concerns
those
me.
books might also go up because they aren't competing as much, so they can
Yes.
ask more for books. That's just another thing as a consumer. Like, if you aren't a blogger and you're like, I don't care about ARCs, I don't ever get ARCs anyway. As a consumer, the cost of books could go up because of that. And already, like, hardbacks, depending on the book, are $30, $35, $40. Even in our lifetime, I remember them being $20, and that was expensive. Yeah. And now it is $30, $35, $40, or more, depending on what the book is. Like, the new Obama book is ridiculously expensive. It's like $45 or like something like that, like really expensive for the new Obama book for the public. And yeah, so keep that in mind, that those costs will go up, which is then prohibitive to buying books. Like, I understand why they would do that, because they need to make more money somehow. But there will be people who are like, I can't afford to spend $45 on a book. And
then you also have to think about, too, this just occurred to me, not every book gets an audiobook.
Yep.
Again, an audiobook is incredibly expensive to produce if the work is like any kind of length.
Yeah.
But only popular titles get audiobooks, first of all. But then, I mean, the cost of audiobooks is already incredibly cost prohibitive. Again, I work at a library, and we do get a discount on our books and all of our other materials, but even with that, like, you can't buy that many audiobooks. Even if you're just buying the digital copy, often the digital copies of books and audiobooks are more expensive than the paper version, which makes no sense to me, but there you go. And then, so if you're the kind of person who needs an audiobook, for whatever reason, print doesn't work for you, you are also going to have a smaller selection of titles available. Even from your library, let alone being able to purchase them.
Yeah.
So it's just all kinds of ugh.
All kinds of ugh.
That's my academic statement on this matter.
This is all kinds of ugh. Yeah. So we just wanted to talk about that and some feelings that we had about that, because it's something that we notice and we care about, and it will affect people, and they may not have heard about it. So yeah. Just and
it affects both of our jobs too, in really, really interesting ways. When I remember people being in Barnes & Noble and being like, because I used to work also at a Barnes & Noble, and he will be like, well, I can get this book, so much cheaper on Amazon. Yep. And people not understanding that Amazon specifically loses money on the books that they sell you because they upcharge you on things like electronics. But someone like a Barnes & Noble, like your local bookstore, can't give you those discounts because that is their major thing that they sell, and they can't afford to lose that money. So again, as these costs go up and something like Amazon continues to offer that cutback, you're losing more local bookstores, even a chain like Barnes & Noble or Books A Million,
Yes,
can't.
Please keep in mind that, like, Barnes & Noble just got bought out by another company, and they are struggling. Like, a lot, I hear folks be like, oh, I want to shop local, so I'm not shopping at big box stores. Please understand, big box stores are also struggling against Amazon right now. Like,
and at least big box stores employ local people.
Yes.
Like, they might not necessarily be owned by local people, but, they at least, they offer jobs.
Yeah. Like, we have jobs. And Barnes & Noble employs far more people than, like, DSW does, which is where I worked previously. Like, our store at DSW had 2 managers and 2 extra key holders, and then 5 employees outside of that for that entire store. The Barnes & Noble that I am at, has 5 managers, 2 extra key holders that are just trained, and then something like 20 other employees that work in the store, either in the cafe or on the floor as booksellers, as receivers, as whatever else that they're doing. That is a lot of people that they have in there, and they have that many people because they know that they need to have people on the floor to talk to customers, because that is a needed experience in a bookstore. They can't just have a giant empty book floor. It doesn't work. So yes, please support physical bookstores if you can, and if you want to shop locally, love it, do it, but don't forget about Barnes & Noble. They are also struggling.
Yeah, like if you can't get it from your local bookstore, it's not like, oh, I guess I can get it from Amazon. Like go Barnes and Noble, go Books A Million. Make Amazon your stop of last resort
if you can.
And
that includes
if you can, you might not be able to. I understand that for some things, like there are necessary services that it provides.
Yeah.
But I've made the decision to like cut Amazon almost entirely out of my life. From not using Goodreads anymore to I don't have Prime. I'm getting rid of my Prime actually. But like my boyfriend is hearing impaired, and if we want to watch a movie, it needs to have subtitles. And sometimes the only place that you can get it to rent it might be Amazon.
Yep.
Like,
yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah, the truth.
So, anyway, just makes me sad, and I hope that maybe BEA will be reimagined in a way that helps to re-level that playing field, and maybe the Penguin Random House Simon & Schuster merger will get denied on the basis of trusts and monopolies. But I'm cynical.
It probably won't, because there are still...
And I don't believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope that I am proven wrong, but hey, 2020 was up.
Yeah. For folks, just because Gretchen mentioned it briefly, for folks that are looking for alternatives to Amazon elsewhere on the internet, we recommend the Storygraph as a new app/website for tracking your reading and also finding new titles. Beautiful.
Oh, good.
Black-owned business. It looks way better than Goodreads does, because Goodreads looks old and crappy, and it functions a little bit better as well. So if you want to get in on that, it is still in beta, but it is working towards full release, and it is doing wicked good.
If you are a statistics nerd, it is the place to be. You can import all your Goodreads data so you won't lose it, which is good because I've used Goodreads since 2011. But like the different stats and graphs and things that it gives you, just chef's kiss.
And it also has tagging for triggers, which is something that Goodreads refuses to do, and something that I think is super important for folks. If you have triggers, Storygraph has tagging for triggers, so you can look at a book beforehand and see if it has been tagged with any of your triggers to know easily, without reading reviews and possibly getting spoiled, whether or not it's something that you can handle. So that's great. If you are an audiobook person, obviously your library has apps like Libby or Overdrive or something along those lines where you can rent audiobooks, but there is also an app called Libro FM, which lets you have the same subscription service as Audible does, where you pay like a certain amount and you get a credit for an audiobook. But the money for those audiobooks, or when you purchase audiobooks, goes to small bookstores and that sort of thing. So you're no longer giving that money over to Amazon. You are now giving it over to just bookstores in general. I think you can select a specific bookstore if you want to support a specific one, but it does just distribute that amongst bookstores that have opted into that.
I've actually asked for a subscription to Libro FM for Christmas because I've been listening to so many audiobooks lately, and I was like, oh, well, I could get an Audible. I can't. So that's one of my requests for Christmas.
For shopping online, if you want to support general small businesses, bookshop.org lets you search through a bunch of small owned businesses. I believe there is also some website that does specifically black owned businesses if you still want to make sure that you are supporting black owned businesses, which you should be, and you are able to. I will see if I can find that website. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there is a website that lets you look at specifically black owned businesses, and bookshop.org will always go to small owned bookshops and just search their network and have one of them send you that book. So that's also another way to search. If you are shopping online, obviously you can still do it through Barnes & Noble and many other places, but if your local bookstore doesn't have it and you just want to search a small bookstore, that's another website that is a good resource for you. Just to give those to you as options, because some people may not know that there are those options out there. So for you.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't know about bookshop.org. I think until it showed up in a Jess Owens video. Yeah. Because she's just my go-to now.
Besties. She is quality. Again, please go support Jess because she's doing work that is actually helping a lot of us. And we needed that, and I was not going to make it because I am so behind and not in on that conversation online. I'm not good at it, but I like to see and be aware of it. So please go support her. That's awesome. I think that's all that we're going to do. We'll be back at some point with something. Gretchen will be back tomorrow with a video because she's awesome at that.
I have actually managed, I think like I'm going on like 3 or 4 months now of actually having a video every Monday.
I know, it's not fair.
Here's what I do. It's just like, I create a huge backlog because I'm lazy and I haven't done anything. And then I just like power film. Just wear layers. And then like with every video.
One shirt off.
There are sometimes I'm really lazy and I don't bother, but I just like in my like thumbnail, I just like hide down in the corner. Like you can't tell from here that it's the same shirt.
Quality. I love it. All
Listen,
right.
You're here to hear me talk about books, not care about what I wear. This ain't Vogue.
It's true. It's not Vogue. So yes, stay safe, guys, because we're still in a pandemic. I know that vaccine has hopefully just... I know that it was recommended for emergency use. I don't know if it has been approved for emergency use yet here in America. Has it? Okay. So then, yes, the vaccine has just been approved. Keep in mind that is going to go to certain places first, like hospitals where the doctors need to get it so that they can stop getting sick. Other places like that. It's also going to go to probably nursing homes and other places where people are high risk before it comes out to the general populace. And keep in mind that there are other vaccines in the work that will hopefully also get approved at some point so that if they do only have a limited number of vaccines of those, there will be others coming out. Please take that vaccine. Like, don't just hope for herd immunity. Please get that vaccine because the only way that we can get rid of the virus, like get rid of it, is if everybody gets vaccinated who can get vaccinated. I'm sure there will be people who, for whatever reason, cannot get vaccinated, and we need to protect them by everybody else who can get it getting that vaccine. That is important.
But yeah, just stay safe and understand that like even though the vaccine seems wonderful and you're like, oh yay, 2021, gonna party again, like Michaela said, regular people are not gonna get this until maybe the summer if we're lucky, if we have enough. If rollout, because like the Pfizer vaccine has already caused severe complications with people with severe allergies in England, for example. So that's an issue. So like I don't want to be, grumpy Gus here, but just remember that we are still, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but is V far away.
Yes.
So just stay safe and stay smart.
Yes.
And, just here's what I recommend you do. Go spend some time with your library's online digital app or at bookstore.com, whatever you can, financially support, and just read.
Stay inside and read.
Stay inside and read. I mean, I can't because I have to work, and I'm sure many people otherwise do, but like, if given the choice between going out and reading, read.
Yeah, please do. And stop being the person in my... Yeah, I know you guys probably aren't, but stop being the person in my bookstore that goes into the cafe and despite being explicitly told that they cannot remove the drink from the cafe, walks around the store drinking the drink. You are not allowed in the rest of the store with your mask off. You can sit in the cafe at the tables that are specifically placed 6 feet apart from the other tables. You cannot walk around the bookstore with your mask off. Get back in the cafe.
No, our Barnes has their tables, like, they're out. And our library can't have people in it. So... And I have been moved from my office to a small basement room because we can't all fit in our office anymore. So, like, I would someday like to see the light of day.
No.
So.
Always in the basement for you.
Basement creature. All right, we should go.
Yes, we should go. All right. We hope you guys are safe. Stay safe.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you again soon. Bye.